Everyone's favorite tiefling and vampire is going to be returning to Dungeons and Dragons from Baldur's Gate 3 with the new player expansion, The Forgotten Realms Hero of Faerun, which is set to release later this year. And we have to talk about it because there's some very serious implications for the canon and lore of Baldur's Gate 3, as this book is set to be about 8 years after the events of Baldur's Gate 3. And Astarion is also getting his own standalone book alongside this, which is also set to release later this year. And it's going to be narrated by Astarion himself, which means there has to be an established canon here now if it's after the events of Baldur's Gate 3. So we got a few different paths that have to happen. Either Astarion's going to be his ascended form or his vampire form. And even little things like saying that they have to hide from sunlight will be clues to whether or not he gets ascended or not. And that's pretty big because people have been asking for more Astarion content. I also see people complaining that we're now getting more Astarion content and saying Wizards of the Coast is milking. This is their intellectual property. They're allowed to make these things. And I'm happy to see it, honestly, because this is going to be something that's going to lead into Baldur's Gate 4. They've even posted it on their own Twitter, the Dungeons and Dragons here. So you can see there, The Forgotten Realms Hero of Faerun and The Adventures of Faerun. So these are two new books that are coming soon. And you can also pre-order them there. But we also got a nice little glimpse here. You can see our favorite here, Astarion, is in this image that was released recently. And also, the Astarion's Book of Hunger's release date is potentially going to be in October of this year. So again, there's going to have to be an established lore here. Now, Baldur's Gate 4, I honestly think we will see Astarion and Karlach back in there. Sam and Neil both have said that they want to join in on it. And also, they do Dungeons and Dragons live. If you've probably seen the videos on YouTube, they're very passionate about D&D, and I love to see that. So if you haven't watched those videos, I highly recommend checking them out because they are pretty funny. But we're going to get some more Astarion content. This book is set to be narrated by Astarion. It also comes with 3 different vampiric backgrounds in that book. You can also play as a half vampire Damphir. So there's a lot of stuff coming with that book. The price of it seems pretty decent. Like I've seen it's supposed to be around like $15 or so. So it's nothing too extravagant. And obviously books like this do cost quite a bit of money, but you can also Google the Astarion's Book of Hunger and you're going to see a lot of different things about Astarion as well. And there's also some new images with Karlach here fighting a dragon, which I think looks incredible. And Wizards customer support actually confirmed that Astarion's Book of Hunger's Netherrealm's Fall and the Secret 3rd expansion will be available for purchase separately after the full release of the Forgotten Realms Adventures in Faerun. So after the book here gets released, we will later see a release for the Astarion's Book of Hunger, which is actually really exciting to see. You don't have to purchase all of them. There's different expansions there. Before we dive further into the information, I thought this was a pretty funny post they had. Barbarian, I have a plan. They use Karlach's image there. The plan, the casters, and me looking forward to the loot. I thought that was pretty funny, so I just wanted to share that there. But this is also coming after there is a Stranger Things collaboration here with Dungeons and Dragons, which I've seen some people upset about it, but let's just, anything that's going to grow the D&D fan base, I think is a good thing. So this, obviously, if you've watched Stranger Things, it references Dungeons and Dragons quite a bit. So this collaboration does kind of make sense. I know some people are upset about it, but that's fine. You also see some other stuff here related to D&D or BG3 merch as well. After we got things like this, I'm happy to see some higher quality stuff. I actually seen these in person. They're pretty funny. Yeah, I saw that in person. It made me laugh. The staff wasn't very wrecked. And Shadowheart looked a little bit questionable. So I think that Astarion's Book of Hungers will be much better. And seeing the characters from Baldur's Gate 3 in more products and things like that, I think is cool. People have been asking for more Astarion content. And now that we're getting it, for some reason, there's people online complaining and saying that Wizards of the Coast is milking this. But this, again, is something that they should do because people have been asking for it. And with Baldur's Gate 4 happening, we do have to have some sort of canon that happened in the game. Like Jaehaera, for example, she's been in all the Baldur's Gate games, and she'll likely appear in the next edition that comes out. Not sure when Baldur's Gate 4 will be set. They will be making Baldur's Gate 4, and it's very likely that we'll see Neil and Sam back reprising their roles as Astarion and Karlach. For Karlach, I think it's pretty straightforward. She's likely going to have to go back to Avernus there with Wyll. I think that's the likely. They're not going to have Karlach die off. It just doesn't make sense. So her ending makes sense. The number 2 that I think is what's going to happen with our friend Gale and with Astarion. Like Shadowheart, they're not going to make her fall in the path of Iconia. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So I think Shadowheart is going to go kind of a good route. But these two here are kind of ambitious, and I'm not too sure what's going to happen because they could tell some very compelling stories. I know a lot of people I love Spawn Astarion. I don't like Ascended Astarion. But, here's the big but. Ascended Astarion would make an incredible villain because he's so charismatic, people love him, and he's had a lot of trauma, which would explain why he would be evil. The evil route for Astarion actually does make sense if you consider everything, and that's no one saved Astarion for those 200 years that he was tortured and going through all of that. And that's why he disproves all the time in the game, is because he's been through it. But I could actually see them taking Astarion as a sort of a villain route, as they do. If Baldur's Gate 4 exists, he's going to be in it, and he could be the big bad. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I could understand it. I could see it happening. Spawn Astarion is great. It could go well, but I feel like they're limiting themselves with the storytelling if they go that route. And as for Gale, this is another interesting one because Gale could be ascended to become the god of ambition, or Gale just does his thing and becomes a professor of Waterdeep, which is one of the canon endings of the game. I think either of these two could go with their evil routes, because with Gale's, he could go after and try to take over, I guess, Mystra's position there, and kind of, there's a lot of ways that they could go about telling Gale's story, but I personally think that Astarion's, I guess we'll know more when the book drops, how they go about doing this, but it really just leads me to believe that they have a grand plan for what's going to happen into Baldur's Gate 4, and I'm very curious to see what does happen. Astarion's Book of Hungers is also stated to actually give backstory to Astarion. Like, we know he was a magistrate back in the city and uses his cunning to kind of get victims for himself, but yeah, they do say that they're going to be telling the story about his favorite tavern and a lot of things related to his backstory, which I think will be great to hear. Now, the book will really dictate where things are going to be going, because they could literally say something as little as Astarion has to hide from sunlight, then you know he's spawned still. So it just depends really how the book and narration goes, and the fact that it's going to be narrated by Astarion I think is pretty interesting. We'll just have to wait and see how that all pans out when the time comes, but they got a big decision here, and it's going to have serious implications for the next Baldur's Gate game, which is coming, so we just gotta wait and see. Now, for other characters, Minsc obviously does Minsc things. Jaehaera likely survives the Shadow Curse. Shadowheart, as mentioned, is not very unlikely to go the way of Viconia, because it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for her character development. But as stated, Astarion could go Ascended, and I think kind of like if you played Borderlands 2, Handsome Jack, one of the best villains in gaming just because he's so charismatic and evil. Astarion could go kind of the same road. Not saying that Astarion would be the main villain of Baldur's Gate 4, but I mean, I would think it would be some pretty compelling storytelling after everything that he's been through. We'll just have to wait and see, obviously, for Astarion's Book of Hunger to come out to see where the story goes. But I can also see characters like Lae'zel going kind of, she's not going to get consumed by Black Kith. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for her character development. So I could see her being kind of like a Githyanki freedom fighter, just kind of doing her own thing away from the control that she's been through all her life. I think that makes sense. As mentioned, Wyll and Karlach will likely go to Avernus. So I feel like they'll all get happy endings, but it's these two fellas right here that I'm not too sure exactly how the story will end and go for them, but I'm very excited to see this next book come out and what's next for Baldur's Gate. But please let me know what you're thinking and your thoughts on this, because I think this is a very interesting development. And yeah, feel free to leave a comment below, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I hope you have a great day, and we'll catch y'all in the next video.